Welcome to The Coaching Corner, a podcast for coaches coaching in the child welfare field. I'm your host, James Coloma, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about remaining in a space of inquiry. We'll be exploring how we use cultural humility to remain in that space, and how we ask questions of those that we're working with, whether that be our clients or our colleagues, to help build relationships and engage those that we're working with. In a moment, Nancy Satterwhite will join us on today's episode to help us understand more about this topic. I'm James Coloma, and we'll be right back. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you could join us today. Would you please tell us a little about yourself?
My name is Nancy Satterwhite. I have been with the Academy for Professional Excellence for a little over a year now as a county consultant assigned primarily to Riverside County. Prior to my coming to the Academy, I worked for Riverside County as a child welfare worker, a supervisor, and a manager. I have also had experience working with children and families who have been affected by substance abuse, child maltreatment issues, and those who are the most difficult populations to work with. And I'm just so glad to be a part of this podcast today.
Well, great. I'm glad that you're with us as well. So our podcast is about remaining in a space of inquiry. So to you, Nancy, what does that mean?
Remaining in a space of inquiry to me means that we take a different approach to cultural competency than we have in the past. As professionals, we strive to be correct in all that we do, and we pride ourselves in knowing the people that we work with and knowing how to best assist them in solving their problems. And there's nothing wrong with that approach, but remaining in a space of inquiry, I would like to challenge us to really look at cultural humility, and that takes a different stance than what we primarily do when we work with families. And this approach means that we are not necessarily the experts. We don't know exactly what each family that we work with, how they define themselves, how they see their culture, what is best for them in terms of us working with them, looking at their strengths. And so for us as professionals to sit back and say, we don't know, can you please educate me? Asking some questions to find out about their family and what would work best for them. Taking that a step further, not only with the people that we work with, the children and families, but then also with our colleagues and network stakeholders, all of those who we come in contact with, just being able to step back and take a humble approach to saying, please teach me about you, about your family, about your culture, because I'm not sure.
So what it sounds to me like is that we're moving away from being an expert in somebody or in your own culture and applying that to somebody else, as opposed to, and we're moving toward trying to gather what that family defines as their culture.
Exactly. Yes.
So what are some of the questions that we could use when we ask another family about how can I be humble about getting to their culture?
We could ask them about what strengths their family has, how they have coped with issues and problems in the past. We primarily like to throw services at our families that we work with, and they may not be culturally sensitive to those families. For an example, really asking about religion, having those kind of conversations, because although a family may not go to traditional counseling, they may go to their church and talk to their pastor, or they may go to a synagogue, or whatever the affiliation that the family may have regarding religion, or extended family members, and not being closed-minded about what the definition of family is, because a lot of our families have extended family members that they consider family. And if we don't ask those specific questions, we may miss opportunities that the family could be assisted and helped in their own well-being.
So going back to religion then, it's not as important to ask somebody what is your religion, but how do you use that religion? What does that religion mean to you?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And when doing so, we're gathering from the information then from the family about how best then how to give them other services that may relate to that, to what their belief is.
That's right. And we talk a lot in our profession about building support networks and safety networks, and that kind of conversation could elicit some other people that we may have never thought about, for people that can be with this family once those who are paid to be in their lives are no longer there.
So it strikes me that even family, that word family, may be different from one person to the next. I may associate that my family is my mom, my dad, and my sister, and others may include their aunt or their grandmother or their next door neighbor as a part of their family.
Most definitely. Family takes on a wide range of definitions for many people. I grew up in a culture where relatives, I call a lot of people aunts and uncle, and they're not blood related at all, but those are some of the best relationships that I have, or childhood friends that I grew up with. My children call them aunts, and there's no blood relation. And so those are people that are just really, really great support systems that these families may have. But if we limit our vocabulary to just including family instead of asking them what kind of support you may have, we could have a missed opportunity.
So what else then do we need to take into consideration when we're working with our families, and how do we remain in that space of inquiry?
We could possibly ask them questions such as, how do you communicate in your family? We can also ask them, what do you like to do together as a family? And an overarching question, which I think is focused on our previous conversation about what constitutes a family, we can ask them, who do you consider family? And then we would have a well-rounded kind of scope on how to proceed with them and look at what kind of supports and services we could help them with.
So I'm mindful that this is also taking into consideration that we all may have biases towards one another, and that maintaining in a space of inquiry helps us to move past those biases. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Right. Because of the culture that we live in, we see biases all the time through media, through internet, television, movies. We see that all the time. We may live in communities where there are people who are only like us. So we may not have had relationships with people who are different. And even if we have to be careful about not attributing those type of qualities or experiences onto someone else. And so just being mindful about checking our own biases and thinking about where we could be biased as we are working with families, stakeholders, and even our colleagues. Just really looking at that and having some self-awareness and some self-inquiry about that, I think is really going to be able to help us along. Because like you said, we all have biases. We are all judgmental in certain areas. But if we're aware of that, then that's going to help us. And it's also going to help us to continue to ask those questions and be humble about it and to be able to say, I don't know, and that be okay.
What happens if we leave that space of inquiry? How do we get ourselves back?
I think that could be difficult sometimes, especially with the work we do. Sometimes we could fall into that easily, but I think just keeping that as a heightened awareness and also having someone that you can go to, having a mentor or a colleague that you can run something by. If you are being self-aware and asking yourself some questions, if you're feeling like your work with a family is not maybe going the way that you want it to go, instead of maybe thinking, something may be wrong with the family and they're not relating and engaging to me, think about maybe what your part could be in it. Ask a colleague, maybe do a little research on that family's culture, and then be able to go back and ask them some questions. Again, humility is the main thing, being able to have that conversation and say, I'm not sure what's going on here. I do not want to offend you. please teach me about how we can work together better. Teach me about your culture. Teach me about your family.
I've heard a term in the past called "ouch to educate." Have you heard that before? And if so, would you mind sharing what that means?
I have heard that before. To me, that means that you're willing to step back and say, oops, sorry, I'll take that one because I'm not sure how this is affecting or impacting our relationship. And in this process, if I step back and I say, ouch, my bad, then it's an opportunity to educate, to have a conversation, to have some meaningful dialogue about what's going on.
That's great. I really like that term. I also see it that to empower whoever we're working with to say ouch, meaning that, oh, you've hurt me, or I'm taking that in a maybe in a different way than it was intended. And that lets me know, all right, well, maybe I need to pause myself and ask other questions around about how I might have overstepped and offended somebody else.
Exactly, and I like the way that you put that. I think with that, it's going to take some trust. It's going to take some really strong engagement for someone to be able to feel comfortable to say that, and that's work on both parts.
So I'm mindful that these podcasts are for our coaches that are coming on board. So as a coach, do you have any advice to give to other coaches around how they could remain in a space of inquiry when they're working with, when they're coaching others?
I would say to ask questions and to just go into working with a family as they are unique. They are like no one else that you have ever worked with. And allow them to know that you are there to learn from them as much as you can provide, if not more, in your working relationship. And set it up from the very beginning that you know that you're different from each other. Even if you look the same, you're still different. Even if you speak the same language, you're still different, and that's okay. And that differences are okay, and that you want to start out with a nice, trusting relationship where there is open communication and you're available to receive feedback as well as to give it.
Do you have anything else that you want to add that we may not have covered so far?
I think we covered it pretty well. I think it's just questions. Just ask all the questions that you can and just know that as a professional, you are still learning. You're a lifelong learner, and you can take those lessons on to work with countless families.
Well, Nancy, I appreciate you spending some time with us today. I think that I've learned that asking questions helps me to remain in that space of inquiry, to get more information from those to help me engage with those that I'm talking with.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll be right back. You've been listening to The Coaching Corner from the Public Child Welfare Training Academy Radio through the Academy for Professional Excellence at San Diego State University School of Social Work. For more information about the Academy for Professional Excellence and the services we offer, please visit us on the web at theacademy.sdsu.edu. You can also subscribe to the Academy for Professional Excellence's YouTube page by searching for the Academy SDSU. If you want to get hold of us and let me know if I remained in a space of inquiry during this podcast, please send me an email to jcoloma@mail.sdsu.edu, and in the subject line, reference the title of this podcast. A special thank you to our guest today, Nancy Satterwhite. Please join us next time as we explore other topics in the child welfare arena. I'm your host, James Coloma, and now go out there and inspire and innovate our child welfare field.